Welcome to Son of a Glitch. Join us as we explore some of the internet's craziest glitch stories. Story 1. First of all, sorry for my writing, my English isn't very good, so I used a translator to help me. This happened to me a few days ago, and I can't get it out of my head because it was so strange. I was watching a movie and decided to go to the bathroom. I took the chance to splash some water on my face, and in that moment I looked at myself in the mirror and kind of saw myself outside my body. It all happened really fast, like 10 to 15 seconds. While I was looking at myself in the mirror, it was as if my face suddenly zoomed in, and I was looking at myself from outside my body, watching myself in the mirror. I don't know if that makes sense. And when I was looking at myself, I didn't recognize myself. It was so crazy. I didn't know who I was. I was just staring at a stranger. Then I snapped out of this trance, feeling really weird. I remember exactly how it felt and what I experienced, and I can't stop thinking about it. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before. I just had to share it and ask, has anything like this ever happened to you? Story 2. So this morning I took my usual route to work, nothing special. I walk a few blocks, hop on the train, and transfer once before getting downtown. I've done this commute hundreds of times. On my way to the train, I pass a bus stop where a local bus usually picks people up. Out of habit, I glance over, and I swear I see myself sitting there. Same jacket, same headphones, same slouched posture. The only difference was that this me had a coffee cup in hand. Here's the weird part. I don't take the bus. Ever. The timing doesn't work, and it doesn't even go near my job. I froze for a second, staring, and the other me looked up at exactly the same moment, like we felt each other's eyes. It wasn't just someone who looked like me. It was me. I know my own face. My gut knew it before my brain even caught up. I panicked a little and looked away, pretending to check my phone. When I glanced back a second later, the bus had already pulled up, and the other me was gone. I never saw him get on, and when the bus left, the bench was empty. I rode the rest of the way to work feeling unsettled, like I was in the wrong timeline or something. When I sat down at my desk, I couldn't stop thinking, what if that was the version of me from the day I almost missed the train months ago? What if I was looking at the life where I chose differently? Story 3. This occurred just yesterday at a local mall. Both Mom and I witnessed this, and joked either they slipped into another dimension, or we did. Mom and I were about to step onto the escalator, but noticed a man and his wife was about to cut in front of us. I slowed down to let them, but then they slowed down and let Mom and I get on first. That's why I took notice of them. Mom was one step below me to the right, and I was standing to the left, so effectively we were blocking people from passing. As Mom was to my right, I could notice the man and his wife on the corner of my eye, and realized maybe Mom was blocking them, because they stood very close behind us. You know that feeling when someone stands really close to you? I had that the whole time until they vanished. We were already around halfway up the escalator, so I asked Mom to step in front of me to let people pass. As soon as she did, we felt that no one was behind us anymore. Both her and I instinctively looked back and realized we were the only two people on the escalator. We both looked around and couldn't see the man and his wife. We initially thought maybe they walked off the escalator, but realized we were already halfway up, so we would have heard them walk down, and it was a long walk, so we would have seen them unless ran, but again we heard nothing. Even though I didn't see them clearly on the escalator, I knew someone was behind my mom, as I could see, and remember the shadow at the corner of my eye. My mom said she definitely felt someone was behind her the whole time, until she walked in front of me. The strangest thing still was this is a very busy local mall, and for us two to be on this empty escalator around 2 p.m. is just weird. As soon as we got off the escalator, both Mom and I kept questioning, did we imagine those two people, or was it a glitch? Or did they or us slipped into a different dimension? Most logical explanation would be they never got on the escalator, but who were the shadow I saw at the corner of my eyes when I spoke with Mom, and why did both Mom and I felt people behind us, and then instantly both of us felt that no one was behind us anymore? We both literally looked back and scanned the escalator questioning, where did those two people go? Story 4. I'm seriously freaked out right now. Last week my bank card stopped working for no reason. I couldn't use it contactless or in the ATM, so I canceled it and ordered a replacement. Today my new bank card arrived, and I went in my purse to get rid of the old one. There was two. The one I've just canceled and a card that's been canceled for at least 2 years. Can't have been missed, as every month I take everything out of my purse, including the cards, sort through everything, throw out old receipts, etc., and put it all back in. It can't be explained by me forgetting to get rid of the older one, as every time I sort out my purse there has only been one. And to make this even stranger, as I said the card was cancelled over 2 years ago, I've had the purse 7/8 months max. This has me absolutely baffled. Edited to include the fact that my eldest daughter saw me get rid of the older one. Story 5. I had, I guess, a strange visitation several years ago after driving my child home from their fast food job. For reference, I live on the outskirts of a city in the interior of BC. It was dark on the drive, and when we arrived home. Wait, was it dark? How did I see the back seat then? Anyway, I put the car in park, then probably took the keys out of the ignition, and went to grab my purse, I think somewhere on the floor of the passenger seat next to me. As I came back up, my eyes traveled over my rear view mirror. To my complete surprise, there was a guy sitting in the middle of the back seat. I remember his hair was blonde and straight, and I think he was wearing a striped shirt of approximately pink or salmon tones, and I am not sure if he was smiling, but he did look happy. I now can't remember for sure, but I think it was a bit like looking at a picture, not like he was moving or necessarily aware. It startled me so bad that I didn't say a word to my child, and I didn't look again. I just got out and went into the house. I knew that there was no guy really sitting in the back seat of my vehicle, but I didn't want to scare my child, so I didn't say anything. It was a used vehicle. We had had it several years by that point, and for much later, but to my knowledge it had never been in an accident, and neither did anything like that happen again. It was so weird. I didn't recognize him then or now, but I've always wondered who he was, and why he appeared in my car that dark night. Story 6. My younger brother and I were playing Halo in the basement when we were in high school, both of us sunk deep into the glow of the TV screen. Our parents had gone out for the evening with one simple request: fold the clean laundry sitting on the couch downstairs. There was a whole mountain of it, t-shirts, jeans, towels, socks, all dumped together in a soft heap waiting for us. We were supposed to do it right after they left. But of course, being teenagers, we didn't. We told ourselves we'd fold the clothes in just a minute while we loaded up another match, and then another, and then another. The house grew quieter as night settled in, just the soft hum of the dryer still running somewhere upstairs and the clack of our controllers. Maybe 2 hours after they left, we heard it, the sound of keys jangling at the front door upstairs, the door opening and closing, and then that unmistakable greeting drifting down to us. "Boys, we're home." The exact same words my parents always used when they came back, cheerful and casual, like an audio cue that life was back to normal. My brother paused the game, and we both froze, waiting for the inevitable next line. "Why haven't you folded the clothes yet?" But nothing came. No footsteps, no movement upstairs, no second line. Just silence. We waited another minute, controllers loose in our hands. Then I shrugged. "Guess they didn't care," I said. He nodded. We turned back to the game, laughing a little nervously but quickly sinking back into our digital firefight. Another hour passed. Maybe 2. The house stayed quiet except for our muffled voices and the sound of gunfire from the TV. The laundry still sat untouched on the couch. We'd half forgotten about that strange moment when it happened again. Keys jingling. Front door opening and closing. The exact same greeting, same tone, same rhythm. "Boys, we're home." My brother and I whipped our heads toward each other instantly. We both heard it. This wasn't déjà vu, this was a repeat. Before either of us could even speak, my mom's voice called out again, sharper this time. "Why haven't you folded the clothes like I asked you to?" We looked at each other in total confusion. My brother shouted back up the stairs, "You've been home for 2 hours." There was a beat of silence. Then my dad's voice, bewildered, floated back. "What do you mean?" "We just got back." The hair on my arms stood up. I dropped my controller. My brother stood, halfway between the couch and the stairs, like he didn't know whether to go up or stay put. We both felt it, the weight of something that didn't make sense, something we couldn't reason our way out of. We scrambled upstairs and there they were, coats still on, car keys in hand, grocery bags by the door. They looked exactly like 2 people who had just walked in. Not 2 people who'd been home for hours. I tried to explain what had happened, that we'd heard them come in before, that we'd heard the greeting, the keys, the door, everything. But as I said the words out loud, they sounded ridiculous, like a dream you're trying to describe after you've woken up. My parents just frowned at us, confused but not alarmed, and told us to get the laundry done already. But my brother and I weren't confused. We were freaked out. We went back downstairs in silence, folded the clothes as fast as we could, and didn't say a word about it for the rest of the night. To this day, we swear on our lives that we both heard it the first time, that the keys jingled, the door opened and closed, the greeting echoed through the house. We even remember the tiny details, the specific jingle of my dad's keychain, the way my mom's voice rises a little at the end of "Boys, we're home." There was no mistaking it, and there definitely wasn't a second sound of the door opening, or anyone leaving in between. The house had stayed still and quiet the whole time. I'm a pretty logical person. My brother's the same way. We're not the type to believe in ghosts or glitches or whatever. But to this day, I have no explanation for what happened. Story 7. I was taking my kid to a doctor's appointment in a busy suburban office complex, the kind where you can never find parking, and where every building looks exactly the same, rows of beige concrete and tinted windows reflecting the sky. It was one of those sunny afternoons where everything feels slightly rushed. Cars streamed steadily down the street, engines humming, horns blaring occasionally as drivers grew impatient. People were walking in and out of buildings, talking on phones, carrying coffee cups, juggling folders. Even the air buzzed with insects, gnats and tiny flies drifting lazily near the landscaping shrubs. As we crossed the parking lot toward the building, my mind was already half on the appointment. What paperwork I'd need, how long the wait might be, whether my kid would get anxious in the exam room. It was just a normal, busy day. And then, just for a moment, everything stopped. It was like someone hit pause on reality. Cars in the street froze where they were, as if every driver had simultaneously slammed on their brakes. People stopped mid-step, one woman holding her phone up in front of her face, as if frozen in a photograph. The breeze that had been rustling the leaves simply died. Even the insects hung in the air, motionless, like tiny specks suspended in glass. And there was no sound. That was the strangest part. This intersection is always loud, constant traffic, engines, the faint roar of the highway a few blocks away. But in that instant there was nothing. Absolute silence. I stopped walking without even realizing it. My kid stopped too, their small hands still in mine. I blinked a few times, waiting for the noise to come back, thinking maybe my ears had popped or something. It couldn't have lasted more than a second or two, maybe 3 at most, but in the moment it felt stretched out, slow and heavy, like time itself had gone thick. Then, just as suddenly, everything started moving again. Cars rolled forward. People took their next steps. A horn honked. A bird chirped from somewhere. The world snapped back to normal, as if nothing had happened. I tried to shake it off. My rational brain immediately started spinning. Maybe I'd zoned out, maybe I'd had a micro blackout, maybe the noise from traffic just dipped for a second, and my brain filled in the blanks. But before I could say anything, my kid squeezed my hand and said, very matter-of-factly, "That was weird." It seemed like everything just stopped. I stared down at them. "You noticed that too?" I asked. They nodded, eyes wide but not scared, just confused. "Yeah," they said. Everything froze. That sent a chill up my spine. Because if it were just me, I could write it off as a trick of perception. Adults are good at dismissing things, stress, fatigue, daydreams. But kids? Kids don't usually overanalyze. They just say what they see. We went inside the building, checked in at the front desk, and sat down in the waiting room like nothing had happened. My kid pulled out a book from their backpack. I sat there, still turning it over in my mind, replaying the moment like a loop. The sun glinting off a stopped car. The insect frozen midair. The silence pressing down on everything. I didn't mention it again to my kid. They didn't bring it up either. But it stayed with me, the way some dreams do. Too vivid to fade, too strange to explain. Story 8. This one was absolutely nuts. I went with my wife to visit my dad one weekend. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary, just one of those lazy afternoons where you feel like catching up with family, getting a decent meal, and hanging out. We went out for a late lunch at this little place my dad likes, nothing fancy but solid food, the kind of spot where they still serve bottomless coffee and pie by the slice. Lunch was great. We joked around, talked about work and plans for the summer, and lingered longer than usual because nobody was in a rush. Afterward, we went back to my dad's place. He made coffee like he always does, strong enough to peel paint off the walls. We sat around the living room, mugs in hand, and ended up putting on Netflix. My dad, for whatever reason, had queued up this bizarre documentary called Poop Cruise. That's exactly what it sounds like, a documentary about a cruise ship where things went horribly wrong with the plumbing. It was one of those oddball choices that made the three of us laugh harder than the show probably deserved. We were cracking jokes, pausing it to comment on the ridiculousness, just enjoying ourselves. It was, by all accounts, a great afternoon. Familiar, comfortable. After coffee and the documentary, we eventually headed home. The evening rolled out as naturally as the afternoon had. My wife and I had dinner, talked about the day, and even had a little intimate fun later that night. It was honestly one of those nice, low-key days you don't even think about twice at the time. Fast forward a few days. I'm chatting with my wife, and I bring up something funny from the Poop Cruise documentary, some ridiculous quote or scene that had us all cracking up, and she just stares at me blankly. No glimmer of recognition. Not even a, "Oh yeah, that was weird." Nothing. Now, admittedly, my wife is more than a bit of a stoner. Her memory can be patchy if she's been smoking, and we've both learned to laugh about it. But she wasn't stoned that day, not in my memory anyway. She seemed completely normal the entire afternoon, present and engaged. Yet here she was, looking at me like I was making up some elaborate joke. I let it go for the moment, but the weirdness stuck in my head. A little later I decided to text my dad, just to confirm my own sanity. I kept it casual. "Hey, that was a fun afternoon the other day. Thanks for lunch and the coffee." "Poop Cruise, man." He writes back almost immediately. "What are you talking about?" That stopped me cold. He didn't remember either. Not the lunch, not the coffee, not the Netflix documentary. Nothing. So now I'm sitting there thinking, maybe I dreamed the whole thing. Maybe, after taking a couple shrooms and a gummy followed by a shot of good scotch, a combination I have indulged in before, I'd had a hyper-realistic dream. But the thing is, I hadn't done that cocktail in a while. And even when I had, my dreams were never like this. This had been crisp, vivid, real in every sensory detail. The taste of the coffee, the way my dad laughed at one part, the exact sunlight coming through his living room window. I couldn't shake it. The more I thought about it, the more impossible it seemed. But life goes on. A couple of weeks passed, and we planned another visit. This time I wasn't thinking about it much. I figured maybe my brain had just glitched. Maybe I'd conflated 2 different days, or imagined one entirely. Then we got there. And sure enough, it happened. The same late lunch at the same restaurant. The same conversation topics. The same coffee afterward. The same ridiculous Poop Cruise documentary on Netflix. The same jokes, the same laughter. It was beyond déjà vu. It wasn't like that flicker of familiarity you sometimes get. It was like watching a scene from a movie I'd already seen, beat for beat. Every single detail lined up. And the strangest part? Anytime I tried to change a detail, to crack a different joke, to order something else at lunch, to say something out of left field, it was like I couldn't. Not because something stopped me physically, but because the flow of the afternoon just pushed me back into the same grooves. My words would catch, or someone would interrupt, or the timing would shift and I'd miss my chance. It all played out naturally, but exactly the same. I kept glancing at my wife, waiting to see if she'd notice. She didn't. She was just living it. My dad didn't seem aware of anything either. I felt like I was the only one trapped in a rerun. It's entirely possible that the meds I'm on nudged me into some weird mental state. But I've been on the same meds for over a decade, and nothing like this has ever happened to me before. No hallucinations, no time loops, nothing. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and I have none. Just my own memory of that impossible afternoon. But to this day, it stands out as one of the strangest things I've ever experienced. Totally messed up. Story 9. My boyfriend and I were visiting some of his friends for a few days. They lived in the Tannersville, Pennsylvania area. At least I think that's how you spell it. It's a beautiful region, full of rolling hills and thick woods. Even the main roads feel a little tucked away from the rest of the world. One evening we drove into town to grab gas and some snacks before heading back to his friend's place. It was one of those dusky hours where the sky's going purple and the tree line is dark and solid. The road we took back was heavily wooded, the kind of two-lane country road where your headlights catch nothing but endless trunks and branches on either side. It felt quiet and isolated, like we were the only car for miles. As we rounded a bend, I noticed an opening up ahead, a break in the trees. Sitting there, right off the road, was a log cabin that doubled as a bar. It looked like something out of a movie. Wooden siding, warm yellow lights glowing from the windows, and several cars parked at odd angles just off the shoulder of the road. It wasn't a paved lot, just dirt and gravel. I remember pointing and saying, "Hey, look at that. Let's check it out." We were curious, so we pulled over. Up close, the place looked even more inviting. There was a hand-painted wooden sign, though I can't remember exactly what it said now, something with tavern or saloon in the name. Inside it was dim and warm, with the smell of beer and wood smoke. The floor was worn, the ceiling low, and it was absolutely packed with people who all looked like they belonged there. Older men in work boots, women in heavy sweaters, couples chatting at the bar. It felt like we'd stumbled into a local secret. We found an open pool table and started a game. People nodded at us politely, but didn't act surprised to see outsiders. It was lively but not rowdy, just folks drinking draft beer and shooting pool, music playing softly in the background. We stayed for maybe an hour and a half, long enough to play a few games and have a couple of pints. I remember thinking how cool it was to find a hidden cabin bar like this, tucked away off some random road. When we got back to his friend's house later that night, we told them about it. There's this little cabin bar just off the road, kind of near the gas station. Great vibe, cheap beer, we said. But they just looked at us blankly. We've never heard of any place like that around here, they told us. That struck me as odd because they'd lived in the area for years. Surely they would have known about a bar that obvious. We laughed it off and said we'd show them. Tomorrow night, we'll all go back. You'll love it, we promised. The next evening, we set out to find it again. We retraced the exact same route, back to the gas station, down the same heavily wooded road, eyes peeled for the clearing. We drove slower this time, scanning both sides of the road carefully. No cabin. No cars parked off the shoulder. No sign. Nothing. We turned around and tried again, going even farther this time. Still nothing. We drove up and down that stretch of road multiple times. It should have been impossible to miss. It had been so distinctive, a glowing cabin bar in the middle of the woods, with cars parked outside like a scene from a postcard. But it was gone. Story 10. Okay, so, just a month ago, I and a good friend experienced a slip. In time/space? For which we have absolutely no explanation, while returning from Colorado after a 6-day girls' weekend. I and 5 other friends who have known each other since high school, so over the course of nearly 50 years, got together in a beautiful Airbnb treehouse, with a private hot spring-fed pool high in the mountains. Our dear friend T, who had hoped to join us, was not there. She had died suddenly and unexpectedly, about a month before the gathering. We held a moving and meaningful ceremony, where we each released a pinch of her ashes into the creek that ran down the valley, next to the treehouse. The next day, my friend P and I set off east across the plains on our way home. We'd been driving along I-70 for hours and stopped for gas in Russell. A few minutes later, we pulled off again at a rest area. We were listening to a John Prine CD that had belonged to T. The CD skipped and crackled for a split second as we pulled off the highway. I remember wondering when they had built this rest area. P and I had both traveled this stretch of road hundreds of times in our lives, and there had never been a rest stop just east of Russell before. We pulled back on the road continuing east, and a moment later, we saw a sign that said Abilene, 3/4 miles flushed face. We had planned to turn off in Salina. There are multiple exits for Salina along I-70. The town stretches 10 miles along the highway, and you just can't miss the big Petro truck stop sign at the exit we'd planned to take. Neither of us had seen any sign of Salina, even though it was apparently 20 to 30 miles behind us at that point. We pulled off at Abilene, just about the time we'd estimated we would be arriving in Salina. We were utterly baffled. We had no idea what had happened, or how we'd managed to skip over at least 40 miles of very familiar highway, totally missing the biggest town for several hundred miles, and somehow slipping half an hour ahead of the time it should have taken us to reach Abilene. And before you ask, no, we had not indulged in our stash of special Colorado treats that day. As we merged onto the highway westbound to backtrack to Salina, the John Prine CD skipped and crackled one more time. Glitch in the Matrix? Who knows? P and I speculated that T was messing around with us for all the mushy memorial stuff in Colorado. Story 11. I was grocery shopping with my husband one afternoon. We were doing the usual run, milk, bread, a few things for dinner, and as always, we forgot something on our list. My husband offered to go back and grab it while I stayed put with the cart. I didn't want him to have to look all over for me later, so I decided to just wait for him near the end of the aisle. As I stood there, absent-mindedly scrolling on my phone and looking at the shelves, a boy walked past me, and the second I saw him I was immediately thrown off balance. He couldn't have been more than 16, maybe 17 at the oldest, but it wasn't just his age that caught my eye, it was everything about his appearance. He was dressed head to toe like a teenager straight out of the 1990s. He wore a loose, oversized flannel shirt over a faded band tee, baggy jeans that sagged just enough at the ankles, and on his feet were Airwalk sneakers. The kind that used to be everywhere in the 90s, but you almost never see now. His hair sealed the deal, an overgrown bowl cut, parted slightly in the middle, the sort of haircut every skater kid had back then. Seeing him was like seeing a ghost of my own high school years walking down the aisle of Walmart. What really caught me wasn't just the nostalgia, though, it was his expression. He looked panicked, like he was lost or scared, glancing around as if he didn't recognize where he was. Something about it tugged at me, so without really thinking, I stepped toward him and asked, "Are you okay?" He looked directly at me for a second. Not through me, at me. His eyes widened, and his face was pale, like he'd seen something he couldn't make sense of. But he didn't answer. He just turned and kept walking quickly down another aisle. Just then my husband came back with the item we'd forgotten. I immediately pointed after the boy. "Do you see that kid?" I asked. My husband followed my finger, eyes widening. "Whoa," he said. "He looks like he just stepped out of a music video from the 90s grunge era." "I know," I said. "He looks like he's lost. But we're at Walmart." We watched him for another moment as he moved down the aisle, and then, just like that, he was gone. No turning down another aisle, no slipping out the entrance. 1 second he was there, the next he wasn't. We even walked over to check, but he'd completely disappeared. Portal at Walmart? I don't know, but it was the strangest thing I've ever seen. Story 12. I've been thinking about this experience for a long time. It isn't exactly a glitch in the Matrix the way people usually talk about it, but there's something about it that still feels off. It's like an itch in my memory that never goes away. This was sometime around 2006 or maybe 2008. I can't pin the year down exactly anymore. Back then my partner was a guy who was absolutely obsessed with comics. In Italy we had, and maybe still have, these weekly comic magazines, Scorpio and Lancia Story. They were a big deal at the time. They weren't superhero comics like in the US, but thick anthologies of stories from artists all over the world, especially South America. Each issue was like a sampler of different worlds: detective noir, sci-fi, romance, horror. He bought them religiously every week, and our apartment always had a small pile of them on the coffee table. I would read them casually now and then, usually when I was bored or waiting for him to finish something. I liked the variety and the art, but I wasn't as into them as he was. Except there was this one story. I still can't shake it. It ran in installments, a few pages per issue. The main plotline was bizarre, almost satirical. Donald Trump was the president of the United States. The world teetered on the brink of nuclear war with Russia, and behind the scenes there was some shadowy power manipulating him. I remember thinking at the time how ridiculous it was. Trump as president? Come on. It was too far-fetched even for a comic. But the strangest part of all was the ending. In the final chapter, Trump's boss, the true mastermind pulling the strings, was revealed to be a shape-shifting lizard man. Literally a reptilian creature wearing human skin, controlling everything. And in the last twist, this lizard man devoured Trump whole, like a predator eating its prey. Even for a comic story, it was surreal. What stuck with me isn't just the eerie prediction of Trump as president, though that's weird enough in hindsight. What's really haunted me is the way the story itself behaved whenever I tried to read it. I could never understand it properly. I'd start from the beginning, determined to read carefully, and within a few panels I'd find myself forgetting what I had just read. Entire plot points evaporated from my memory almost instantly. Characters seemed to shift roles or motivations between readings. Dialogues didn't seem to match what I remembered. Every time I picked it up, it felt different, like the story was morphing under my eyes, refusing to settle into one fixed version. I remember being frustrated about it, genuinely frustrated. I'd sit there thinking, okay, this time I'm going to read it properly. There's something in this story I'm missing. It's odd and intriguing, and I'm going to figure it out. I'd get myself into a focused state, ready to concentrate. And still, the same thing happened. Lines would blur, the logic would slip away, and by the time I got to the end, I had no clear sense of what I'd just read except that final grotesque image of the lizard man devouring Trump. This went on for weeks. Every time a new issue came out, I'd try again. I even reread the old installments, thinking maybe the translation was bad or maybe the story was intentionally confusing. But it wasn't like any other confusing comic I'd ever read. It was like the words themselves were shifting, as if the panels were alive and slightly different every time. Years later, after Trump actually became president, that comic popped into my head again like a punch in the gut. I thought, no way. Did that story really exist? I went online to search for it. I typed every combination I could think of: Trump, president, comic, reptilian, Scorpio, Lancia story. Nothing. No author names, no issue numbers, no scans. It was as if the story had never existed. Story 13. I will admit to not being a great storyteller. This will be straight and to the point, only including pertinent information, no embellishments. If you get bored, I understand. TLDR at the bottom. So when I was 17, I was riding my bike to my friend's house. This was a trip I made very often, only taking me 15 minutes, even though I rode from one neighborhood to the next. I measured every bike ride by songs, so I would make a note of the song I left on, and also the song I arrived, and add up the times to each song. I always called her before I left home, as I walked out the backyard gate with the bike. I left at 3:10 p.m. I was passing by an undeveloped section in her neighborhood, meaning I only had about 3 more minutes. I suddenly felt dizzy, so I hopped on my bike to get off the road and drank some water. I paused my music while doing this. I get out my phone to text her that I had to stop, and then get back on my way. When I pull into her driveway, I hear her and her mom, as well as my foster mom and foster sister, shouting my name from down the street, around where I stopped to drink. I yell down at them, and they all run back to the house. They ask me where I've been, why didn't I call? I opened my text saying that I stopped and would be there soon, and while the text said I sent it at 3:22 p.m., my clock showed that it was now 6:30 p.m. After everyone settled down and my fosters went back home, I stayed at my friend's and we studied. I added up all the songs I listened to, and it also added up to 15-ish minutes. Somehow I lost 3 hours. Story 14. An odd thing I can't explain. I ordered new sliding doors for my back deck. Took a half day off from work and sat in the family room to watch while the work occurred right there. The contractor asked if he could park his van in the grass of the backyard for easy access to the deck, and of course I let him. It was a small pure white delivery van with those metal racks on the side for moving big sheets of glass. The contractor worked for about an hour. We chatted and whatnot. His pure white van stood there shining in the sun directly in my view through the hole, and then the new doors. When he was finished, he waved and drove off. I got into my car to go to work. Realizing I was running on empty, I headed to the nearest gas station, which was in a strip mall down the road. I was behind the contractor's van. He turned left and entered the strip mall from its back entrance. I continued forward and turned into the strip mall via the front entrance. We both ended up at the same gas station about 3 pumps apart. I pumped my gas. He pumped his gas. I left before he did. As I drove past him, I noted with great surprise his van was silver. Not white. Silver. Still can't explain it. Story 15. Just recently I had one of those experiences that makes you stop and wonder. Not a big, dramatic thing, no flashing lights or shadowy figures, but the kind of odd, quiet event that sticks with you because it simply shouldn't have happened. I was supposed to meet up with my father for lunch at a local restaurant. It's a place we go to regularly, at least once a month. We know the menu by heart, we know the servers by name. It's a routine stop for both of us. Because it's midsummer and the weather was decent, I decided to walk there instead of driving. It's only about a 10-minute walk from my place, an easy, familiar stroll I've done countless times over the years. I'm the type who likes to be early. For casual things like lunch, I give myself at least 5 extra minutes. For anything more serious, like appointments or interviews, I'm a full 30 minutes ahead of schedule. It's just how I am. I like knowing there's wiggle room. So this day, I left 5 minutes early. I'd checked my clocks before heading out, my phone, my computer, the wall clock in the kitchen. Everything was perfectly synced. Satellite time, the whole deal. I felt confident, as usual, that I knew exactly what time it was. The walk was completely ordinary. I know this neighborhood like the back of my hand. I've lived here for well over a decade. I passed the usual houses, the same patches of shade under the same trees, the same little cracks in the sidewalk. The sun was warm, but not unbearable. Cars drove past, a couple of joggers went by. Nothing out of the ordinary at all. As I got close to the restaurant, literally crossing the street right before the block it's on, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was my dad calling. When I answered, he asked, "Did you forget something today?" His tone wasn't annoyed, just a little puzzled. I said, "No, why? I'm just about to walk into the restaurant." "I'm already here," he said. That threw me for a second. My dad's punctual, but he's rarely that early. Still, no big deal, I thought. Maybe he just got there ahead of me this time. "Okay," I told him. "I'll be inside in a minute." I hung up, crossed the street, and went inside. Sure enough, there he was already seated. I smiled and apologized automatically, thinking maybe I'd misjudged my timing. It happens, right? But when I sat down and checked my phone again, actually looked at the time this time, I froze. I wasn't just a minute or two late. I was 5 minutes late. Somehow my short 10-minute walk had turned into 20 minutes. I scrolled through my recent calls and saw that my dad had tried to call me once already before the call I answered. There was a voicemail time-stamped earlier than I expected. My stomach dropped. I tried to retrace my steps in my mind. Had I stopped somewhere without realizing it? Did I get caught at a light? Did I zone out and wander off my route? No. The streets I'd crossed are small. There had been no big delays, no traffic jams, nothing unusual at all. It had been a completely normal, straightforward walk. Story 16. This was an experience a friend of mine had in England, in regards to what could be possibly called a dimensional bleed-through, or a glitch in the matrix. Several years ago, my friend John was visiting a small farmhouse somewhere in the south of England, and as he was walking across the yard towards the house, he heard the sound of horses galloping up behind him. When he turned round, he saw several men dressed armor wielding swords. Some of them dismounted and ran into the barn, stabbing their swords into the hay, and others were checking the house out as if they were looking for someone. The leader of the group was hollering, "Where is he? He's got to be here." A short while later, after they found no one, they left. John was dumbfounded, to say the least. After returning to the city, he told his friend of his experience. The friend asked if he could accompany James on his next visit to the farm. They went the following weekend, and neither one of them was disappointed, as the very same scenario occurred again in the same order. Only this time, when the leader called out, "Where is he?" John, the silly bugger, said, "I'm here." Much to his surprise, the leader came over and thrust his sword in John's belly. John said he was mystified because he actually felt the sword going into his belly and then being withdrawn. The soldiers left after that. John's friend's jaw was almost hanging to his knees after witnessing the event. I told John he should have said, "He's over here," and then pointed to his friend. Wouldn't that have given him something to talk about later? Several weeks later, John researched the history of the area and found out that there were soldiers burning villages in that area. John's conclusion to the incident was that he and his friend had both walked into a different dimension or time period and actually became part of it. I'd say it was a bleed-through into a possible past incarnation. The thing that's puzzling is that his friend also witnessed the strange happening. Story 17. In 1992, I was driving home at 1 a.m., and I pulled up for a red light at a T-junction, surrounded by buildings. The light swiftly went green, but just before I could take my foot off the brake pedal, I heard a voice out of nowhere. Not like my voice. I've not heard it before or since. It just said, "Don't go." Now, I could only see darkness on the road in front of me, and I don't believe in any gods, so I thought, no, I'll go ahead. I put my foot on the accelerator, and just as I was moving into the intersection, 3 cars, with their headlights OFF, sped across the road in front of me. I swerved and missed them all, but if I hadn't hesitated for that couple of seconds because of the voice, they would have all slammed into the side of my car. Now, I have no idea where the voice came from. All I know is that I couldn't see the cars approaching, and the voice wasn't my internal monologue. I still don't believe in any gods. But if anything defines a glitch within the matrix, I think that's it. Outside influence. Story 18. I had dropped off my wife and youngest daughter, wife for a luncheon at the convention center in town, daughter at uni to look over her final. They don't get them back here, and meet a friend. I ran my own errands and would pick them up later. At a red light, I picked up the phone, glanced at the lock screen for any new messages, nothing, then put it down in the cup holder. Clunk. I hadn't put it down clean, it fell to the floor. I didn't see where it went. I pulled into my next stop, the grocery store, and checked under my seat. Nothing. Then between the seat and center console. Nothing. Did it fall the other way? Passenger seat, nothing. Back seat floor. Nothing. Floor mats? Nothing under them. The phone had fallen through a glitch in the matrix. Utterly vanished in a small confined space. I keep the phone on silent, so I couldn't call it. I did have the thought, what if I called and I answered? Of course there's an explanation. The driver's seat is electric, so there are power lines that come down and pass through a slit in the carpet. The phone must have somehow slid into that slit. Even though I couldn't feel anything under the carpet, it had to be there. I couldn't safely reach the slit in a busy parking lot. So I found a big empty parking lot drove fast, and braked to get the phone to slide forward. Then I got out, pulled the driver's seat forward, opened the back door, lay half in the car, reached awkwardly under the seat to the slit, and the phone edge was just reachable. But for a while, the sheer impossibility of the disappearing phone was fascinating. Story 19. I was 27, and I had some big things in my car that I was going to put in the basement of the house I was living in. My house was built on a hill, the driveway was cut in, and was at the level of the basement floor where it went alongside the house, where there was a locked door to the basement. I parked in the driveway, got out, and without thinking or looking too hard, I fumbled with my key cluster to fish out the basement door key, inserted it into the lock, turned it, and pushed the door open, so I could start loading my things in. As I pulled the key out of the lock, I happened to glance down at it, and saw it was not the correct key. It was the key to a door at work. Yet I had just definitely used it to unlock my basement door. Did that just happen? Are they a weird coincidental match? To check myself, I went to insert the key into the lock again. Nope, wouldn't even go in the hole. To this day I have no idea how that happened. The key worked when I wasn't paying attention to it, because I believed I had the correct key, but then when I noticed it was wrong, it no longer worked. Story 20. It was about a month ago that the most weird thing happened to me. We were all going home for our Diwali break, and I was sitting in this auto. I settled in with my bags and took out my phone. As I yanked out my earphones from my bag, one of the earbuds came loose and fell, and was about to roll down the auto. So I picked it up quickly and fixed it back to my earpiece. And in the process, I managed to tangle my earphones with the strap of my bag. As my clumsy ass untangled them, I found that my earbud had managed to slip again. I looked everywhere for it, but got nothing besides the weird stare of the person sitting in front of me. Finally, I gave up and plugged those one earbud earphones in my ears anyway, and started my journey. Fast forward a few days, on my way back to the hostel, I realized that I was still stuck with my one earbud earphones. I reached back to my hostel room and unpacked. Suddenly I remembered that I had an extra pair of earphones in a bag, which by the way I did not carry with myself to my home. Neither that bag nor the earphones. So, I went and searched for them so that I could just take out one earbud to use for the earphones I actually took home. But then I found just this one earbud in my bag and figured it must have slipped out of the other pair. A few days passed until one day the left earpiece of my earphones stopped working. I took out the other pair to use for the first time since I'd come back. It was only then that I realized that it had both the earbuds. I was holding two pairs of earphones with two earbuds each. I never had extra earbuds. How was that even possible? I mean, I lost one, right? There were supposed to be 3 earbuds. And the thing which was even more unsettling was that both the earphones had their own earbuds. Like the earbuds of both the pairs were distinctly different, and I couldn't fathom how on earth that was possible. It's been about a month since that incident, and I still don't understand how. Was this my glitch in the Matrix moment? Story 21. I have a few examples, but this is one of my favorites. Let me start by saying I don't necessarily believe that we live in a matrix, but I digress. My grandmother, whom I was extremely close to, passed away in 2006. This woman was an avid collector of jewelry to the extent we nicknamed her Mr. TLO. Anyway, in those times, I used to frequent a site called Bids. It's an online auction site for jewelry, etc. Anyway, I was talking to a friend about my grandma and laughing at old stories, all while bidding on different things. I fell in love with this ring. A fire sapphire set in gold with a small diamond on each side of the center heart-shaped stone. That being said, I was a single mom, so didn't have a lot of extra money. I stopped bidding at $35. I lost the bid and smiled and said, "Come on, Grandma, you should get me that ring." My friend and I laughed it off. About 15 minutes later, I won 2 other auctions and went to check out, and lo and behold, the ring was in my cart for $35. I couldn't believe it because it had sold for about $250. I even showed my friend my history. It clearly showed I had lost the bid. Story 22. Yes, this happened to me just yesterday. And while it's a rather simple story, it's been looping in my head ever since because I honestly haven't come up with a single explanation that feels satisfying. It's such a small, mundane thing, yet it was weird enough to make me stop in my tracks. I'd been grinding all morning, trying to finish up a few projects that were due today. You know that point where you've been staring at a screen for hours and your brain starts to feel like wet cardboard? That was me. So like any rational person, I decided the best way to reward myself for getting through it was with a nice, cold bowl of ice cream. Simple pleasures. Now, I have a special spoon for ice cream. I call it my ice cream spoon, even though it's just an ordinary metal spoon, except it's not. It's large enough to work as a scooper, but small enough to use like a regular spoon. Perfect size, perfect shape. For some reason, there's only one spoon like it in my entire house, and I've gotten attached to it. I use it every time. I walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer, and picked up my spoon. Everything was normal. As I turned around toward the freezer, though I fumbled it, it slipped out of my hand. No big deal, right? You drop utensils sometimes. They clatter onto the floor, you pick them up, rinse them off, move on. But this time, the usual didn't happen. I waited for that inevitable clink, the sharp ringing sound of metal hitting tile that always comes a split second after you let go. But it never came. No sound at all. I froze. That made no sense. There aren't any rugs or mats in the middle of my kitchen. I was standing on plain tile with at least 5 feet of bare floor in every direction. Nothing to catch or muffle the spoon. I hadn't stumbled or thrown it. I just accidentally released it. Yet it didn't land. It didn't bounce. It didn't make a noise. It was like I dropped the spoon and it disappeared. I crouched down immediately and started scanning the floor. Maybe it slid under a cabinet? Maybe it somehow bounced at a weird angle? I checked under the oven, under the fridge, under the lip of the counter. Nothing. I even ran my hands across the tiles, like maybe it had blended in with the grout. Still nothing. After about a minute of looking, I felt ridiculous. It was a big, shiny metal spoon. There's nowhere for it to hide. But it was gone. Completely gone. I stood up, confused, and just decided to grab another spoon. Fine. I'd rinse off a regular one and use that. No ice cream spoon today. So I went upstairs. And that's when things got really strange. When I walked into the living room, there it was, my ice cream spoon, sitting on the couch. Right in the spot where I normally sit. Not on the coffee table, not balanced on an armrest, but squarely in my seat cushion. Like it had been placed there. I stopped dead. My first thought was that maybe I'd brought it up earlier and forgotten. But no, I hadn't been upstairs with the spoon. I'd just picked it up from the kitchen drawer for the first time minutes ago. I hadn't left the kitchen since. And yet here it was, waiting for me, almost like it was saying, "Psst, come use me." I just stood there staring at it, my brain doing somersaults. I ran through every possible explanation. Could someone else have moved it? No, I was alone in the house. Could it have been there all along, and I'd somehow imagined picking it up in the kitchen? But I remembered the cool weight of it in my hand. I remembered dropping it. I remembered looking for it on the tile. There's no teleportation. Spoons don't slip through floors and reappear upstairs. But that's exactly what seemed to have happened. I picked it up, half expecting it to feel warm or cold or strange, but it was just my normal spoon. Shiny, heavy, perfect size for ice cream. Everything about it was completely ordinary except for how it had gotten there. I sat down on the couch, next to the spot where it had been waiting, and ate my ice cream. The whole time I kept glancing at the spoon like it might vanish again, but it didn't. It just sat there, as mundane as ever. It's such a trivial thing, a spoon, but it left me unsettled. I know what I experienced. I know what I saw, or didn't see. And yet there's no good explanation. Yesterday I dropped my ice cream spoon in the kitchen, and somehow minutes later, it was upstairs on the couch. That's it. Simple story. But I can't stop thinking about it. Story 23. Yes, and I wrote about it here before. This happened years before The Matrix even came out as a movie. So, which made me wonder if The Matrix was more than entertainment, because it actually happened to me. I was as down-to-earth a person as you could get, a straight-A student, totally focused and intentional in my life. A mother of a small child, and as content and as happy as could be. I was walking down this little side street leading to my apartment, passing the little neighborhood grocery store, and that's when it happened. I found myself in a warehouse on an operating table with doctors in green lab coats surrounding me, and then in a split second I was back on the street walking past the store. That's it. It was the weirdest thing ever. But since then, I've had a few experiences that made me look back on that experience and think that this was the beginning when they realized something wasn't right in my brain, because I had made an unexpected decision, so they were tweaking my brain to try to fix it. Since then, I've had a few positive tweaks that I really can't account for on my own. But those are another story. I am not a kook. This is just something that happened in a split-second moment of time that I can't explain.